are on the cutting edge and recording all the calls, everything, and it's all on YouTube. So,
yes.
Yeah, so I just saw that you'd comment on it, so then I figured I should come here because I'm in the area.
awesome.
But I don't really know how useful I will be. So as I understand it, the question is whether is reload navigation, or I guess the question was the back forward specifically, because whether it is history navigation should be true or false back, and it redirects to a different URL. So for the post redirect URL, whether the service worker should see is history navigation true or false. So the use case we had for history navigation was the service worker may want to do different things depending on it, whether it knows it's a back forward navigation or whether it's a reload or whether it's a normal navigation. Specifically for a back navigation, the idea was the service worker can choose to get things directly from the cache instead of getting fresh content to try to optimize that. And then if it's a reload, it should kind of more aggressively go to network instead of getting things from the cache because it's a signal from the user that the page is like broken or the user wants fresh content. So that's kind of how we ended up with these two things. I think some sites are using it today. It is history navigation to decide to go to cache. So with that use case in mind, it felt to me like after a redirect, it was started by a back navigation. So telling the service worker it's a back navigation kind of fits that use case. But I don't know whether that breaks other things.
So what we had in mind is, for us and for navigation timing, the use case is basically I want to be able to split my reporting and the metrics that I've collected based on navigation types, because the performance characteristics of navigation, reload, or a back forward navigation are different. So I want to reduce noise by splitting out those types. And from that perspective, if a back forward navigation then redirects to a brand new page, that feels like a navigation from that perspective.
Yeah.
I don't understand why it wouldn't be the same case for a service worker, assuming that, like, if the use case is getting things from cache versus not, why is that? Like, why wouldn't the service worker treat that as a navigation if it's a brand new page that?
I don't know whether the brand new page is really relevant for the service worker. It's kind of like it's taking the user intent and deciding what content to show. So it's like, oh, the user's just trying to go back. I'm just going to show whatever we had in the cache, so we don't slow down that back operation. It's possible with BF cache that it's not that important. Because I don't know if with BF cache would we even do this redirect? If the page is BF cache, you probably this wouldn't happen, right? You would just but this was created kind of before that.
Well, if you hit back enough times, you would blow through the BF cache, right?
Yeah, it's possible that it's not in the BF cache, right?
Right.
Yeah, when you go back. So yeah, in that case, it would still be relevant. So yeah, I still think from this, like the use case we had in mind, like telling the service where the user is going back is kind of
If you go back enough times, then the navigation type description, that distinction doesn't make sense. Because if the thing is not in the BF cache from a performance characteristics perspective,
it feels like the question is, are we focused on the user intent? Like what button is the user hitting? Or are we focused on some sort of implementation details about whether we're caching or not? And it feels like you're saying that we're actually focused on user intent.
for the exposed, these flags exposed, we were thinking of user intent more than, I guess, I don't know, the alternative. User intent versus like the infrastructure.
Yeah, whether or not we're fetching this from the BF cache.
Yeah, we were thinking more user
And that makes sense for service worker, whereas navigation timing,
Yeah.
which was designed to enable measurement and bucketing,
Yeah.
was not considering user intent, was instead considering the semantics of the navigation. In this scenario, though,
It doesn't, like,
I mean, it doesn't, it's weird.
I wouldn't go out of my way to make sure that this particular use case falls in the right bucket. Because I think there are potentially two of them. One of them is a test page that Boris wrote. No, I'm just like, I don't think that this is a use case that exists in the wild. Am I, like?
Oh, the redirect.
Yeah, the redirect thing. I think that it's, do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree. He's just saying spec it. That's all.
Yeah, sure. What I'm saying is if our definitions of what it should be don't necessarily align, I will happily align with your definition because yeah, it seems like an edge case. So, I'll go.
I need to deal with a couple things on the 34th floor and I'll be back as soon as I can.
Okay,
All right,
cool. Okay, so
Yeah, I also don't know how often this happens in the wild or if it matters, really. So.
where do those definitions sit from your perspective? Because navigation timing has an enum with all those, do I have it open? Yes. Like there's an enum with navigate, reload, back forward, and image generate pre-render. That we have defined that we probably shouldn't have defined. So if there's already an HTML or fetch definition of what each of one of them means, you can probably just point at that.
Yeah, I think we did this in HTML or fetch.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I think it's probably in both.
Oh, there's,
Because fetch is the one that exposes the property, is history navigation. And this gets set when the request history navigation flag is set. And yeah, this is used by HTML to navigate algorithm. So that's where they sit.
Okay, so I can try to, but because we also have an issue where we just generally need to properly hook this up with HTML, and this would, this would be the clean place to use. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it would be kind of unfortunate if this is like very hard to like spec. So I think I'd probably also be okay with whatever's easiest. Because I'm guessing it doesn't really happen in the wild.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of giving the use case viewpoint of that because I saw the GitHub issue.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I've only heard maybe a few words because I'm very tired. From an implementation point of view, how do we get the flag today? Is it like on the request object?
Well, from the implementation point,
From the spec point of view, like we get the is reload, is navigate. Yeah, the flag that we set on the fetch event, does that come from like the internal request?
It's not on fetch event anymore. It's on request now.
Okay, so it's associated with the request. So from a spec point of view, this is like when a redirect happens, we would just copy that flag to the new request to maintain. And that seems like a small change
Okay, so
that we can add, we can make on and do. Because it's in fetch.
It's effectively taking the flag and saying, when a redirect happens, copy the is reload and the
history thing.
copy the is history. Let me not add reload to that.
Sorry, is history.
Is history.
And is that flag then piped into the navigation that the request created? Do you know?
The navigation.
When the
How is-
browser is
how is that
navigating
flag
and
initially
then
set?
eventually creating a document, do you know if we have access to that? So we
I-
can then set that type on the document
I think,
so that we can read it.
yeah, I think the navigate algorithm in HTML makes the request. And then when fetch goes into redirect, it like kind of pops back into the navigation algorithm.
Yeah.
And then either the fetch spec or HTML spec.
Oh,
will
that's true. It's
propagate
a separate request every time in navigation.
it, makes a copy.
Yeah, it makes a
Yeah.
new request every time. So we would have to do it in HTML spec to copy the flag. Just still on. So I'm fine. Oh, sorry. Well, punchy. I think if we can I think we need to talk to Anna and be like, we would like to do this. Yes, no, do you have objections? If he doesn't have objections, then like, someone just has to do the PR. I don't know, as if we can agree on that's the behavior we'll have.
I agree that we should,
Just pick one, just pick something.
if one of them is easier than the other, although you could also say, you could similarly say that in case of a redirect, if it was a back forward, now becomes a navigate. You don't, you can. But I think that the use case from our perspective tends toward navigate, but is not very strong. So I'm fine with aligning with whatever you end up with, and then reading that navigation type off of the document, assuming that you eventually have to set it on the document, or you just need it at the fetch request.
Just need to fetch.
Yeah.
Fetch request.
And then.
I mean, we don't have any stateful thing, like performance API has stateful things trying to track when was the first redirect and as long as it's not cross origin and stuff like that, that service worker doesn't have that to worry about. We only care about the current state of the request, not previous redirects.
Yeah.
So thinking about this a little bit more, I actually think I might have gone back on my previous comment, but I think the intention from the user is maybe more important from the navigation timing API perspective.
Okay.
Like you want to measure how fast are my navigations. And I know that these 4 different types of navigations typically have different performance characteristics. So I want to understand that. And if I had this expectation that clicking the back button is generally faster than doing a reload, but my statistics point that actually in many cases clicking the back button is slow.
Because I have an unload event handler. I added an unload event handler.
I would dig in to see why that might be the case. And so if it, technically it's the case that you press the back button, but then the browser couldn't pull it from the BF cache, and then it went to load it, but then there was a redirect and all that stuff happened. Maybe that's worth knowing about so that you can identify the performance level.
Okay, so can you reply on the issue telling me I'm wrong?
So
Yeah, and that, I mean, I can buy that argument that, yeah, the user intent is.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't fall into. Yeah, it doesn't fall into the same bucket, you would have a bimodal thing for back forward caches, and then, yeah, you need to dig into why that is.
And you would know if there was a redirect, that would still show up, right, in the redirect count and the number, yeah. So you could see theoretically that this was initiated by a back or forward button press by the user, but it didn't involve a redirect. And maybe that's why it was slow.
Yeah,
Can I ask a silly question?
sure.
I'm sorry, I probably missed it, just. Are you adding an API to be able to observe back forward cache transitions? Because there's no network request that happens when that occurs.
So this is navigation time. So there will not be a network request potentially if everything is in the back forward cache, but there will be a document generated. That document will have a navigation timing entry telling you this is a back forward navigation that took 0 time for.
So you're gonna erase what was the previous state of the document in the navigation timing It's like all the state of the document is frozen in BF cache, all the heap, everything. But when you come back out, you're overwriting the bits that are in navigation timing entry.
I'm actually not sure. I
That
think in a
seems-
BF cache case, you don't get new navigation time entries, you just get the page show event, correct?
Right.
So that means that back forward never, like, shouldn't be a thing.
Like you would need to create some new thing to say like,
Yeah.
performance observer fires like,
Yeah.
yeah, like something to indicate, well, you would get the page show with dot persist, and that's how you could fire something like, something went back or forward.
Yeah.
Um,
And in this perspective, you could still track that was happening. with
But-
the page show.
but you wouldn't, yeah,
You wouldn't get new navigation time entries. Or a great navigation time entry. But I think the point is still that in the case of a back or a forward, typically all of those resources are cached, and so you expect it to be faster.
Yeah, but if there is no navigation timing entry right now, like, if everything is, just brought in from cache magically, then nothing should be.
well, right, I guess I didn't know if you were adding spec language to change the navigation timing entry.
To be honest, I don't know, but do you?
What is there? I mean, the way this BF cache has traditionally been viewed is as a browser optimization that sites cannot detect, except through like page show dot persist equals true. Because of that, generally the state of like all the things it should see should not magically change when it comes back out. So if you were like in other specs, like in service workers, when we do something that would have been observable from the page, or could have observed the absence of the page, then we evict the page from BF cache.
Is the navigation processing evoked when BF cache
No,
is happening?
no, there's no event, there's nothing, there's no fetch event, it's just as if the page had gotten frozen and then comes back to life. And it can tell from like timestamps being different, perhaps it lost some time.
The time origin is still the original navigation
Yeah.
time origin.
Yeah.
So for the service worker case,
Interesting.
for the service worker case,
Is
that's
the
relevant
page
for
ever
the
went away?
sub-resources? For the service worker case, that's just relevant for the sub-resources. Like when the service worker sees a back-forward navigation?
It doesn't.
So why are we talking
I
about?
think we're conflating the backward cache and the history navigation.
Oh.
Assuming there's no assuming you're not going, if it didn't get taken out of the backward cache, you're going to get a fetch event in the service worker for this
Okay.
navigation.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's a normal network request.
Yeah.
Okay,
But when you're coming out of BF cache, it's just like, it's kind of like the page lifecycle thing where like all the bits are in memory, they're just, the event loop is stopped,
okay,
and then it gets restarted.
so back forward is like the only case where you would see it is when the back forward cache was not active.
Yeah.
Which, yeah,
And we don't need to expose that.
I don't see why that would be interesting.
No, I think it's possible we don't want to expose that. We don't need to expose that there's a click on the back button or forward, it's just a navigation.
So it is exposed, but yeah, I don't think we need to, like, I don't think there's a reasonable use case for that.
So we just remove the whole section.
Alongside Pyramider, yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
And I guess we can also remove the email because we have the definitions in the cache.
so there's the navigate and reload, and then, yeah, the separate issue is that we need to pipe all that on the document. HTML on the document probably has that boolean somewhere, so I can, base that off of that, and yeah, either remove the enum and like move the enum to HTML or use some boolean there to see if it's navigate or reload, but those are the two options. Cool. Thank you. Let me try this something out. And now, can you ping Ian to, because he bailed on us. Yeah. No, the only question, do we predict compat issues with removing that? And if someone is somehow relying on getting, I don't know, I can't imagine a scenario. I cannot imagine a scenario.
Something you can maybe imagine is that it might change some bias in somebody's measurement if they're splitting on that field. So they might see their metric regress or improve.
Yeah, but that's,
Seems fine.
Yeah.
You can also ask Nick if he's measuring it. If he's not, I doubt anybody is.
And that is their,
Or we're just asking to stop measuring.
yeah.
True.
Yeah. Okay. Cool, but yeah, no. Ian has left us. But he replaced my previous "Here are a million issues" link with actual issues, so we can start to talk about them maybe until he's around. Okay, so do you have any context?
One more quick,
Oh,
on this
okay.
one. So do we think people are using this as a way of determining how frequently somebody is using like the navigate like back and forward? Just like getting counts, not necessarily getting stats from the load, but getting counts?
I don't know if they are, and if they are, I don't know that it's an explicit goal to enable them
Yeah.
to do that.
They were.
Yeah.
Is Salesforce using the navigation timing subfields for anything that you're aware of?
We should, yeah.
Facebook might, because Andrew opened a
Types,
bug
so
about that or
there's
something.
reload, back forward.
No.
You guys aren't currently.
I mean, page show and page hide, I think, similar things.
Yeah.
I mean,
But I don't know if there's any other way to learn that information other than service worker, I guess. If it's not the first load. But you can make the same argument about reload, like if reload is always gonna be a navigation, it should have similar, especially if people are like in service worker, not going to the cache, it would have similar performance characteristics to the first load. And so then potentially the real use of it is to just understand user behavior rather than understanding the performance of those types of loads. But I don't know. It'd probably be worth asking somebody who's using it to see.
So,
Or specifically defining what are the use cases for exposing these fields. Oh, perfect.
Oh.
okay. And board just answered, why would it necessarily be only ones that did not go through the BF cache?
Well,
Yes. Are you using it for counts or for actual performance characteristics of those types of applications?
We separated the characteristics based on. Okay.
so if it goes through BF cache, it's still a back or a forward. That's the core, does it go through the back forward path?
So for service group point of view, we don't get a fetch event, so we don't see this history navigation.
Right.
When it goes to the back. So that's what I was saying about the service group case. I don't know.
But navigation timing would still have a navigation.
Okay.
And thus, well, no, in BF cache, there won't be a navigation.
Yeah, that's,
I'm gonna. 99%.
Unless you create some new surface area, like, unless you're either overriding the old surface area or creating a new surface area to expose this.
Yeah, so BF cache won't have a navigation, so it will have the existing navigation timing that it had when it was
Right,
created.
yeah, like, I think saying like, the group decided we're not going to change the existing navigation timing entry coming out of the BF cache. If we need to observe back forward cache, coming out of the back forward cache beyond a page show, like, at least my recommendation would be to create some new place some new event or like putting on page show somewhere. Don't overwrite the data that's already there, because, I think that would be a little bit magical and confusing.
yeah. And Nick, the question, so were you before when we talked about the back forward navigation type?
For part of it, but I wasn't paying too close attention.
Okay. Basically, there are problems with the current definition. And then talking about it some more, we realized that it actually doesn't, like, the use case for having that type doesn't really make sense, because at least if we understand it correctly, BF cache navigations will not, like, it's not a new navigation. It's an old navigation. It has its old navigation timing entry.
Okay.
And we are not planning to override it.
And that's what.
And therefore, a back forward would just mean history navigations that didn't come from the BF cache.
Right, yeah.
So because there is no reason for us to expect different performance characteristics from those history navigations compared to regular navigations, we can
You would
ignore that.
expect resources to be more cached, possibly?
Maybe, maybe not. If if the user navigates twice in 2 minutes or navigates
Right.
back and forward, like, it doesn't really.
Yeah, the big segments for us are, regular navigate and reload. And reload in some cases just to signal like something wrong, like happened on the page and the user was upset about it or something, or something like that.
So there's like counts.
Yeah.
I don't know if many or any of our customers, like, so we capture this type in every navigation. I don't know how many of our customers actually like look at that specifically, that forward to segment the data. I haven't really heard about it being used much that way. Or as a meaningful differentiator other than just a regular navigation.
So if it would if it were to go away, you wouldn't be sad. Or.
My guess is no, but I mean, we can do a little bit of research real quick on if we've ever talked about it in our Slack and stuff.
Cool. Thanks.
So, yeah, it definitely doesn't, you don't get a new navigation entry for backward cache. I tried it in Firefox.
Okay. Okay, cool, so I will,
Semantically, it doesn't make sense. Okay.
I will answer Boris later and we'll do more productive stuff. Okay, cool.
Okay, so what are the issues that he? So he
So-
said he'll try to get down.
Okay, so there are 4 or 5 issues that he surfaced in reporting. So observing reports cross-frame. Registering to one frame, be able to observe reports generated in the same origin frame.
Isn't reporting like at an origin level? Like it's not tied to a frame, isn't it? I thought it was tied to the origin.
So
Did-
right now, yes, I don't like, so we are talking about splitting reporting into persistent and ephemeral reporting. And then the ephemeral reporting will be tied to a document, I'm guessing, more than to an origin.
Yeah, I think that's the, like client, use an example. If you have a CSP violation, you
Yeah.
wouldn't expect to see a CSP violation. Like if you have top level documents in an iframe that are
Yeah.
same origin, you wouldn't expect to see a violation that happens in an iframe in a top level document.
Yeah.
Right? So it's
So
same
for
thing. There-
ephemeral reporting, yes, I wouldn't expect that.
It has no, it has no relation to whether it's ephemeral, or whether the policy is persistent. The policy can be persistent to an origin, but the visibility of the report is to the document.
How do you determine which report goes at which time? Like aren't there like some report types like crashes that, or, I don't remember the full list. I was proposing to add one in a later, working group, for storage corruption. And so like, I don't think I would have necessarily a document to associate with the report. Like if we're doing quota computation and
But in this case, you wouldn't also have a reporting observer.
why wouldn't there be, why couldn't?
If you don't have a document, you don't have an observer.
No, but there could be a document that has a reporting observer.
Yeah.
And somewhere we could encounter storage corruption, and I don't see why that document could not.
Oh, you're saying there's a
Like, I would expect it to go to all clients, you know, whether they're a document.
if there's a relevant client with a relevant reporting observer, you would expect it. Okay.
But it seems like you need some mechanism to map what is a relevant
Yeah.
document then, I mean, that's.
So that one, yes, so for example, like another one that would be similar would be a crash with precision, a generic crash report, right, like kind of memory report. There, we know what the policy was for the document, and we just queue the report without firing a reporting observer, because that's my mental model thing.
I mean, why, if there is another tab open in a different process, why wouldn't it get a reporting observer event to know that it's another tab?
I
I mean, to me, like, they're all going to an endpoint, and reporting observer is another way to tap into that. It was not clear to me, at least reading the reporting spec, that the intent was that reports were associated with documents. It looked like a broadcast mechanism based on the origin to me. I mean, maybe that's not, maybe I misunderstood.
No, I think that's their feedback. I don't think it's clear in the spec.
I mean, I can understand for CSP, like, you're trying to understand, like, did my document mess up? Like, that's easier to associate with a document, but like some of these other report types, it seems unclear how to do that. Or at least need something in the spec to make that distinction.
I guess the question, like, it seems like something that would add a lot of complexity. go beyond the scope of the current document for reporting observers, right?
Well-
Or,
But for some report types, there is no definition of current document.
sure, so
You have multiple documents in a
reporting
crash,
observer,
like-
they will have a reporting endpoint.
I know, but like, okay, I guess to me, like, it's adding complexity to try to create this document association where it seems like the simplest thing is just to broadcast it to all reporting observers without creating a mapping between reports and documents. Like, that seems to be adding complexity, not removing.
No, I think there'll be actually more people. It's confusing both sides. It would be confusing for me to observe CSP violations of a different, like if I have multiple pages open, right, same origin, like having everything be broadcast on both pages.
I can see from the context of that report type, I was talking more from an implementation, or spec language world, like CSP is clear there is a document or something that's triggering the CSP violation, but there are other report types that don't have any association with a document necessarily. So what happens with that? And it seems like just to say you don't get reporting observer at all seems, well, that, I guess I would like to ideally have a reporting. I don't know if my proposal is gonna go forward or not, but like, at least for the use cases I had, I was counting on having a reporting observer be able to.
Explain your use case one time.
Sure, I have an explainer, but, today, when we have storage in the browser, we store things in IndexedDB, cache storage, various places, and inevitably, we have to deal with the problem of things break, like devices stop working, bits get flipped, things, virus scanners come in and change things, what have you, or browser engineers write bugs and create corruption. So what happens when browsers storage gets corrupted is completely undefined in any spec. So we all do different things, and usually it amounts to throwing some like undefined exception and then it's hard for sites to, like, they don't know that corruption happens until they try to do something, and then it's like, and then what, was it wiped? Is it still there? We don't know. So step one, so talking to sites, I've gotten a sense that there is low confidence in the stability of storage because of these issues. Like, so step one I was trying to propose was, let's create some visibility by creating a consistent reporting mechanism for when we hit corruption. It might not even, today we do some of this through throwing exceptions, but we can hit storage corruption when there's no method call either. So it gives us a good way to provide, when we're computing quota, there might not be any like JavaScript function that's, that we can reject from. So it gives us a way to consistently report these corruptions regardless of context, but it also would give them a place where they could write like, what do I do? My recovery code can go in my reporting observer and be like, oh, I ran into a corruption. Let me trigger a validation of all my data and re-downloading and loading from the server or wiping or whatever they want to do, based on that. And it would be sort of a consistent way of at least surfacing the corruption. And then the next step would be for browsers to agree on, should we wipe origin? Should we like leave some? And some of this comes into like, we need buckets and other storagey things to happen before we can come up with a policy mechanism. But the first step I was trying to create was like a transparency to help give sites confidence that they know, like, my clients are there and they're not corrupt, or I can see like the corruption rate, in different browsers of the sort of way.
Are there any other signals that store, like, are we broadcasting any other signals already? Any other APIs for storage or related use cases?
I'm not sure what you mean.
I guess part of me wonders if reporting API is actually the right medium for delivering this notification.
I took it as something unexpected error condition happened in the browser that we might not have a way to track when we do quota stuff. There might not even be a document present. Like, how do we get that? It seemed like reporting API was designed for this use case.
agree that it was designed for the use case of sending that information to some endpoint and have developers observe that on the server side. I don't know if if you have a document where, yeah, you're saying the corruption detection doesn't happen within the context of a single document.
Right, like we have one storage subsystem that might
Yeah.
be servicing end documents.
So reporting observer will not work for you even if.
Well, I
You
thought
are
it would
actually-
I thought it would broadcast to all same origin.
Either broadcast or no reporting of
What is the intent of the signal? So let's say corruption happens, right? You want, let's say there's actually no documents. For some reason, we just, like, our storage got corrupted, and then.
Yeah.
Would it make sense to send a report out of bands to an origin saying FYI, like, this is gonna have, like, is that a useful signal?
I think it is, so that, in the context of like, if we can get to the point where we actually, ideally what we want to do is completely wipe the origin when we hit this, because typically that's the only sane way to recover. We don't do that today and because we have to deal with the consequences of losing user data.
Right.
If we get to the world where we want to wipe the origin completely, being able to tell the server that you had a user here that had data and it's gone, like you lost a user to storage corruption, until they log in again, I think is a useful health metric for that site, based on the sites that I talked to.
We wouldn't be able to give you a lot of detail in that report. Like all you would get is some browser.
So the report
got a corruption. Like, there's no.
The report that I was proposing it's a storage report. We hit corruption. What did we, which subsystem was it in? IndexedDB, cache storage, or multiple? What did we do? Leave the data there or wipe it? What did we wipe? And then maybe a debug field that could be pasted into a bug report to the browser. Like we're getting a ton of these things that all have, this browser specific string in it. Can you guys help us debug this, and fix it for us?
And
not sure if I will debug the string.
So they get a spike on their health metrics saying, oh, suddenly we have 1% of our users getting storage corruption, and they all have this string that says corruption and level DB open, checksum failed.
I see.
If they give that to us, that tells us where to look to try to fix the problem.
Okay.
Um,
But then when the app, so let's say all that happens.
Yeah.
And then.
Sorry, it just, that is more useful than us having UMA data to that, because we can then talk to them and be like, tell us what you're doing that might be triggering this corruption. We get the context with the raw error data from Chrome.
Seems like we're doing a very complicated dance to get the data back to ourselves.
Well, it's partly to get data back to ourselves with the context of the site that they can tell us, but also so that they have a dashboard of how healthy their site is in terms of
if all your users are losing their data all the time, then something is wrong either in the browser or in your
Sure,
site.
so I generally agree with the principle of more transparency to help people build up some level of confidence. What I'm still struggling with is I get this report, okay, 10% of my users are failing or they have corruption issues. The next time the user actually opens the site, presumably you'd want to notify the app so they can do some cleanup or restart, right?
Yeah, how would they? The app
You
know the
probably
next time
need an
around.
explicit, you probably want an explicit signal at that point to the app to say sorry, something bad happened.
it depends, the end state we want to get to is where we wipe, so the next time they log in, they would be starting from a fresh site.
Right.
And in that world, that API doesn't really make sense so much, because
But wasn't that what would happen, I guess
we're not to the point where we're wiping things. We tend to leave stuff on disk in a corrupted state until the site comes along and manually deletes it if they can. But like, we would like to get to a point where we wipe the origin.
How would they even know that something bad happened today?
They don't, that's why we need the reporting API. I mean, if we wiped it, they wouldn't know. They would get an exception, and every time they call something on this API, it throws an exception and doesn't let them do anything. And then they write a bug report and we try to help them through it. Or they send, or maybe they just lose the data or the user because they have, like today, we're not in a good state. Like, we need to improve
I
this.
guess I'm failing to connect, like I got a report in my dashboard that says some browser got a corruption to the user that opens, that particular user reopens the site, and what do I do then? Like, ideally, the app should get some sort of notification saying something bad happened.
Well,
You should go like, what?
If there is, this is where I would kind of like the
If-
reporting observer to be able to also, it doesn't help if there's no document open, but
Yeah, but when there is, you can catch that. And
Okay, so
potentially, if you're touching the data, there's a
We would
good
still be
chance
throwing
that someone
exceptions.
asks you to touch the
we would
data.
still be throwing exceptions too, just like we do today. This would be an additional transparency.
So I think I'm finally getting to the point of this, which is, it sounds like what you actually want is to queue a report. And if there happens to be an open window that gets delivered. and if there is no-
I'm not fine, I'm fine if we don't fire the reporting observer if this happens when there's no windows open.
But you want it to fire at some point when the
I-
site is growing.
I think there's an issue of like, we don't want to fire multiple times for the same corruption, and that might be a weakness in my proposal. It makes sense if we get to the world where we wipe things, because then we're sure it's only gonna happen once. We hit a corruption and we wiped it. You're starting over.
Okay, and now you're saying but that is also true regardless of reporting observer. If you send out the report,
Right.
every time you hit the same corruption,
The other reason for reporting observer is, at least some of the sites I've talked to would rather use their own existing reporting infrastructure instead of setting up a new endpoint for the reporting observer. I mean, for the reporting endpoint. Like they're not gonna like try to like, they're not gonna try to like run logic to recover their database. They're just gonna package it in their own impression mechanism.
Yeah, because they already have an endpoint and they don't.
Yeah. But like, this is a workflow we already go through with some sites where like they have a dashboard, they measure how often they get like exceptions thrown from storage APIs. When it spikes, they file a bug, we go talk to them. And we can do this with sites that we have very close relationships with. But it would really be nice to be able to give this visibility to, I don't know, maybe it doesn't make sense, but it seems like providing more transparency might help improve confidence in the storage system on the web. That's sort of my
No,
theory.
I'm actually totally for it. I'm just trying to reason
Yeah,
whether reporting observer actually makes sense. Because it seems like as a developer, what I would want if corruption happened for whatever reason, right, is when the user navigates to my site, is like first thing, you get some sort of notification from the subsystem saying like, FYI, you should like clean stuff. And at that point, I can just beacon it to my server as well and report it back to myself.
The impression that I'm hearing from you, Ilya, is that you want like either a different kind of exception being thrown or some kind of event being emitted from storage API.
Yeah, I guess
So
what I'm
the
saying
developer
is
can
getting
respond
an
to
event
it.
notification that someone somewhere had a corruption is not actionable at all. To, like, I'm not gonna.
it's actionable in that they get a rate, and it's actionable in that they get a data that they can use to file bugs against the browser.
Very small, like majority of the web does not open bugs against browsers, right? That's just.
But the ones who do certainly help us, and I would like to help, like, we can help people who we have very close relationships with, but this would allow us to get even more people who could give us.
But right now with like say IndexedDB or something, I go to open a database, does Chrome know that there's the previous like version or whatever?
No, it tries to open again and it'll run into the same corruption if it was there.
Yeah, so how would you?
I think IndexedDB might be moving to a model where it auto wipes, but just IndexedDB.
I guess my question is, how would you be able to send a report if you couldn't, like, if you know enough to send a report through the reporting API, you would also know enough to be able to throw a different kind of error that the developer could then
Right, but then we have to go change like 100 different API points to throw this error. And code that's not expecting to see these exceptions today, I mean, or doesn't know to look, and they have to go change all those, like, seems very impractical versus a single spigot out from an adoption point of view. And also, there are cases where we don't have a function that's being called where we can, like, we compute quota when we start the browser to see how much space we should allow you to do. If we hit corruption, either we erase something or we say you can't write any more files, you know, like, because we can't figure out how much space you're using. Like, we're kind of stuck. And I don't know, like, it just seemed like a good fit to me for reporting API and observer, and I think maybe my mental model had a mismatch with.
To me, it sounds similar to the crashes reported.
Yeah.
Like, can't take much action on it, but you can look at the counter.
Yeah, but crashes, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have reporting observer for crashes, because if you crashed.
Well, yeah, but you could have multiple processes in different
So,
tabs.
yeah, you can have multiple renders, like theoretically, and I have no idea, like, but theoretically, we could spin up a new render just to run that reporting
Yeah.
observer.
I just had this model where like reporting observer, like reports went into a single queue out to an endpoint, and reporting observer was simply a tap on that, and anyone who registered just got reports out. And I had no conception that there was like a per document queue mechanism. So,
Maybe I have a slightly different use case in mind that I didn't got hung up on, which is, it sounds like if the thing is corrupted, I as a developer need to take action to fix stuff. And today there's no explicit signal about that. It's just like I go to try to open it and it's broken, and I try to do it again and it's broken, and then I'm just like, I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's a need for some signal that the developer should listen to that says, sorry, you have to take action.
Well,
And that bit is like, could we deliver that via reporting observer? Probably. I think that's an entirely new class of report in a way, because you had a bunch of storage for 10 websites. Storage got corrupted. All of them are corrupted.
Yeah.
Right.
the issue with using reporting observer that I think for that use case is that there's no timeliness guarantee. Like, there's no idea like you're in the, like, it's gonna be fired synchronously from the corruption within the function call. Like, it could be delayed, you know, due to queuing and stuff. I could see the argument for creating a separate surface area in the storage spec. I don't think that's gonna happen, because I think most of the motivation is we wanna move to a place where we are auto wiping anyway. So like, we're not gonna require the developer to take action. We're gonna take action for them unless they opt into a policy of,
Okay.
you know, like,
So
please don't, like, I am a big company who has paid a team to, you know, work on these corruptions. Please don't delete my data because it has user data in it, and, you know, I'm spending a lot of money, but like most sites aren't gonna do that. Like, so we wanna move to a case where the default is wiping. And then like, once we have this bucket mechanism, which allows them to say, I have a bucket which, like, never delete this no matter what policy, they opt into that, like, pain. And maybe then, you know, I don't know, we can.
Okay, so with that in mind, I guess my use case is not relevant, because if we're moving to a world where everything's wiped,
Yeah, we're just not there yet, is the problem.
then really the only thing you want to do is just send a notification saying something bad happened.
Yeah, but I guess I take your point, like, if using reporting observer to enact cleanup logic or validation logic, it would be weird. Not the original use case for reporting observer. I do think, though, at least one of the sites I talked to said they would want to build their own reporting infrastructure off of it. So we need some way and ideally, like, they might even want to, well, that's a whole other bag, like, put it in service worker or something, but I don't know that we'd want to start a service worker to power the reporting observer.
So, related to that,
Sorry.
no, we have this.
I guess they
other
would have to
issue.
queue, for the case where there's no page open, they would have to queue to reporting observer in order to meet the use case where they're gonna do it themselves instead of using the reporting endpoint.
Does that happen sometimes where the corruption happens, like during some like internal Chrome process or browser process?
Yeah, like we have to compute quota, how much space each origin uses in order to determine if we're under pressure to delete stuff, and so we touch every origin to do that computation. So a lot of times there's no tab. The odds of us hitting corruption there, it doesn't happen as often because we can get away with just looking at the sizes of files and things. But there's certain cases where we come to a directory structure where like this doesn't look anything like what we expect. And like that happened more in Firefox than I've seen here.
It's even possible, it does seem like then there's a stronger case for the reporting API because there's literally nothing a developer can do at that point, but knowing that it happened
Yeah,
in
and
some way could be nice.
so we would love to just like delete the origin at that point and move on so that we're not holding things up. And yeah, it feels like we should tell them.
I think slightly related to this discussion regarding documents, there's this issue of exposing to workers.
Before we go down that
Yeah,
let's go back.
it seems like a similar rat hole, but sure.
Well, with my mental model of like, it's just a tap and it's just like a broadcast to all reporting observers, this makes sense. If you have the model of reporting observer only gets things for the associated document, then this doesn't make sense.
So,
Well, you get CSP reports only for the worker. Ian's looking at me like I said something crazy.
No, I'm wondering if workers can trigger violations of their own.
I'm sure they can.
That should
Impulse
be
thread,
avoided.
yeah, they can have,
okay, that's different, yeah.
Right.
yeah, because they have imports for us that could.
Right. And in that case, like, they should register reporting observers.
Yeah. But it wouldn't be per document, it would be per client.
Yes.
Browser, something, contact, environment, something.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called.
Should a
Fine.
report observer registered to one frame be able to observe reports generated in same origins subframes?
So
And you also want other tabs.
Well, this just surprised me because skimming the reporting observer, I had no notion that reports were associated with a document and they would limit it to the reporting observer in that document. I didn't catch that. So that's how we rattled on like this other like proposal I had, kind of based on the idea that reports would be broadcast to
I
all
think there's
reporting
an
observers.
interesting primitive or observation here, which is there are shared resources across documents, windows, whatever, and some things may affect all of them. So there may be a class of reports that needs to be delivered to all windows to notify them of the thing.
How does like
or-
network error logging? If I have two different
I mean, that.
different documents.
Network requests
that-
triggered from clients typically.
Those are not visible to reporting observer.
But they are like the network, if there's a network stack level error, is it piped back to the?
It's going to navigation.
It's not resources, it's just maps.
Okay,
So I would,
okay.
No, it's not.
It's all resources.
It's
It's
resources.
network error, so.
It's errors, but like foo.com tries to fetch something from bar.com and you have a bar.com open window.
Yeah.
Bar.com, because as we defined today, does not get a notification.
Yeah.
The report is queued.
Yeah, but it's not like the network stack has no visibility into which process triggered what and why. Like it can pipe back data essentially, but it's not like.
so one place we could fire a reporting observer or reports for shared resources would be service worker if we were willing to wake up the service worker to do so. It would be an interesting case for something like storage corruption because often wiping storage means getting rid of the service worker registration. So I don't know if it would help my use case, but like that is a place where we do shared resource things. And that could happen in the background, although then we'd have to question whether it's safe to trigger those. Queuing is probably a better solution.
So I would, specifically speaking to this issue, I would say
the default is that the the reports are tied to the document, which they are associated with. See, in this particular question, no, the iframe, iframe is not.
Yeah,
Sure.
my suggestion would be that, yeah, I would say no, that it just keeps it simpler, right, to just report to the document that you have in.
Now, there may be another class of reports, which is this, shared state that gets triggered to everyone.
Yeah.
But that's a new thing.
Right.
And
If we wanna go down that.
and reporting that to the service worker actually, like, I think makes sense, like it's a, like, service worker level reporting observer.
I think depending on the report type, if it's something that can be forcibly triggered, we wanna be careful because it allows someone to run JavaScript in the background. Like if you could arrange, evil.com could arrange to get like
Yeah.
something to happen.
So, yeah.
So just from that risk, I would lean towards more queuing to the next document or the next context. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say that, like, network error logging specifically says that these reports are not visible to reporting servers.
Yeah.
So any discussion of whether network events should go to a reporting server, like, they just don't remember.
But like, yeah, I don't know enough about the different report types. Like when talking about the storage corruption one, I was like, oh, well, we evict origins for like quota usage, right? Like, should we also report for that? But then like, oh, now we're talking about like revealing size information. Like, I don't know, like that seems like in the realm of like leaking, you know, like heist type, you know, side channel leakages. And yeah, so I opted not to do that. But it's interesting. I didn't realize network error logging. It sounds like that like if you're on A.com and you have a sub resource request to B.com and that sub resource request fails, the report goes to B.com, not to A.com. I assumed it would tell the documents, like the document's origin, here are your sub resources that failed.
No, if you've previously been to B.com, like to an actual page of B.com that had a header that said, by the way, this is where we report things, for network
Doesn't
errors.
help with CDMs much, but okay.
Is that can any L be registered for for cross-origin resources without?
Without an actual document?
Yeah, if
Maybe.
like for image CDNs,
Yeah.
for example, is
Like if I want to register my JavaScript user agent, to get notified that it can't be loaded.
Mhm.
Can I do that?
So I think right now you can, because we just followed the report to header, so if you were including the report to header in the JavaScript response or an image response, then we respect that. The talk is about moving that configuration to an origin policy. And I'm not sure if.
when would that origin policy fetch be triggered?
Right,
The
when
origin
would it be
policy is
triggered?
for a document.
That's it, yeah, so.
Yeah.
I don't know whether we would trigger that for image requests first time, or if you'd have to have serendipitously already got one for the
I
document.
think we'll have to revisit that whole thing. It was one of the core use cases of NEL, of being able to observe, like, my JavaScript resource failed when it was being included.
Yeah.
And the reason the report went to that site is because otherwise you would have observed that the resource has loaded from a.com, right, or from that.
Right, you can observe the result already.
Right.
Well, unless it's a no course. I mean, in theory, if it's a script, you can observe it.
No, observe it like on the server.
Oh, right, yes.
So b.com, like, if your request is successful, by definition, the server knows that every resource was requested. And if it failed, that's a problem we want to solve. It's like, basically, we want to just let you know that fetches against your origin are failing for some reason.
Got it.
Where they're coming from is maybe something we can play.
Yeah, also provide a way for third-party providers to register for those reports. With, like, on the one hand, seems nice, at the same time, seems a bit, like, yeah, no, because you're saying anyway it's observable.
Fetch is observable. But anyway, coming back to this one.
Right. Yes.
I think we gave some.
And the answer is no.
The answer is no.
No,
Okay,
no,
well,
I-
I mean, a no makes everything simpler. This is
Yes.
74.
No for this, but for the use case of cash collections, I think that's a new use case that we should think through.
Okay,
I think it does make sense.
just to give you, context, or the tag was kind of like, this doesn't seem actionable, you know, like similar to our conversation here, like what are you actually gonna do with these things? So it's unclear to me if we're really gonna move forward with it or not. I wanna have, like, at the web apps group, I'm gonna have a session, hopefully, just proposing this as, you know, through transparency to like, what's our plan for storage corruptions in general? So I don't think it's an urgent use case that's gonna happen, like,
So I think we could definitely accommodate it.
Okay.
Of course, when I say we.
Think of it as a vertical, like reporting observer lives or dies on its own. This is just a feature separate from
Yeah.
observer, right?
right, yeah. I mean, I think the idea of like shared resources is something that reporting observers should definitely think about supporting with, reporting spec should, reporting API should think about supporting with the observer.
Yes.
mechanism.
So maybe this requires infrastructure from the reporting API,
Okay.
but the report itself is a separate.
Yeah,
Feature.
it's a separate explainer right now.
And
For it.
I think it's probably worthwhile to try to like, I don't know, discourse, right, or something along those lines that will like, YCG thing. Just to get use cases from people to know or talk to partners about a public announcement that basically says, if you have run into data corruptions with service workers,
It's not just
is that
service
interesting or not?
So I think this, if you just wanted to get visibility with minimum amount of work, skip reporting to reporting observer and just queue the report. So require that the page defines a collection endpoint for this particular type and just fire it. And then like,
It's just,
Like, that's
Yeah.
it's much less as interesting with the partners that I'm working with, because they don't wanna use the report, they don't wanna build new server-side infrastructure.
Can I use third-party collectors?
It's first party partners.
well, given
But
that,
ones that already have a reporting.
Exactly, they already have
infrastructure of
a-
their own, and, yeah.
Yeah, which is bespoke, and, you know.
yeah,
I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, I'm just saying as a priority to motivate me to do it soon, that's why, you know, it's less likely to happen.
my counter argument or carrot for that would be, there's so many other things you can get if you have a report to collector, right?
No, I agree, I would need someone, I'm a big fan of like, if I'm gonna build something, I would like to have someone who's saying that they're gonna use it, so I know I build it right, you know, to make it useful. And at least the people I'm talking to right now are telling me we would not use it unless we could like use our own reporting infrastructure. And so I would need to find someone else who is interested enough, you know, and willing to use the report endpoint, which might be out there, I would just need to go find them.
So.
You know what I mean, like, I don't know. Maybe there's
Report
folks
your
at Microsoft who.
What's the report?
Yeah, but we wouldn't bring it to a standards group and have a discussion about it. I would just implement it.
Report reporting API.
Because in other words, I'm with you, but I think the thing you're describing is not the thing being standardized, it's a different thing, right?
Reporting observer lets anyone use their own reporting mechanism by providing a JavaScript API,
Yes.
that they can package it, so I'm not sure what.
So you were
Sure,
on the
same.
same document.
On the same document. And so, are you saying specifically it's the NEL infrastructure? The network error logging?
No, it's basically for that use case to meet those requirements of not creating a new reporting endpoint, they would need to register reporting observer somewhere and get those reports magically, even if they happened when no document was around.
Right, which would effectively be on top of the.
Which
shared infrastructure, right? Which would be something like network airline infrastructure.
Not necessarily, because it's something else. But
I think this has been a useful conversation for me because I did not understand reporting API correctly. And so I need to rethink what I'm proposing. But like, it sounds like to me reporting API in its current form probably does not meet the use case that I have. I'm unsure about what you mean by you would just go implement something.
So if Bing said, hey, we want your browser to get us some data, right? Just like network area logging did before it was a spec, right? You would just build it from the browser. So that's what I thought you were hinting at, is that there was an internal site that wants something like network area logging.
Yeah,
doesn't manage
I'm
other
trying not to build a Chrome specific API. I'm trying,
Yeah. No, I agree. I actually agree the right thing to do is come to the web platform.
Okay.
And I'm not sick, sorry, I might be coming off this crass. I'm not intending to. My intent is to say, I'm sorry you're stuck with a partner who wants you to build something in the Chrome, but I guess I don't understand how they would get something.
I mean, it's much easier to build something Chrome only and like
Yeah.
progress. I was trying to do a more holistic solution
Sure.
for these problems. I think though, given the tag feedback I've gotten, given my misunderstanding of reporting API, like I'm gonna like restructure my conversation at Web Apps group to be more about like, what do we want to do about storage corruption in general? Would transparency be useful? Like, is it worth doing work to try to work with the reporting API to like add this new feature that we would, you know, to help support this use case, you know, those sorts of things.
Okay.
You know, yeah. So like, I need to step back a little bit, like, and do that. But I'm sorry, I feel like I've really derailed the meeting.
No, you're fine.
So like,
And just so you're aware, we had a whole discussion yesterday about the reporting API because it has two phases. There's the per document stuff, and then there's the network error logging, which is the idea of shared and persistent
okay,
stuff.
yes, this would need to be persistent and shared.
Right.
But I wanted reporting observer. I didn't realize that was
Shared reporting server.
And the gist about the thing that happened during the discussion yesterday was that there was a discussion where both Mozilla and Apple said that they are not in favor of the concept right now of persistent reporting as a concept. They are very much behind the idea of a per document reporting observer. And so what might have happened is that you were thinking, oh, well, there's this right shared thing that has a clear reporting format. A spec. Yeah. And you can't be in all of our conversations, right?
yeah,
you could, though.
I had legitimate service worker business yesterday.
And so I think the thing that became clear was that the clear to spec stuff was the per document stuff.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, persistent is essentially a cookie. You know, it opens up all those issues like sticking cookie things in your server endpoint, your reporting endpoint, and then pulling them back out. Anyway, so if they implement it, they probably want to double key it and like do all that jazz. So I don't know.
It's pretty good feedback though that there are a lot of people that don't want to use the endpoint and they want to use the.
I have to say that
our infrastructure is.
But if I mean like, let's say that you're using Google Analytics for your analytics, that endpoint doesn't support this format. So in that case, you would be forced to use
This is a very different type of report.
Yeah, no, I agree, but I wonder if there's potentially, I don't know, this is probably too much for you guys, like a report transform, some kind of way of like changing the data in such a format that your existing endpoint can handle it or something like that.
report transform workload.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say that I heard from other third-party analytics providers that they are also, like, from their perspective, if it's in Reporting Observer, it's super easy to add. If it's not, it's a lot of work, so no.
It does seem like they should ultimately conform to the standard, but.
Probably, yeah, but there is going to be this adoption phase where
Is there like We build like an open source, like server-side proxy thing that just like, reporting server comes out and then you put your workload there, like you put your hook and say, just
Yeah,
put
you
this on,
totally should.
write it in Rust and, put it out there, install this crate, you're done.
And then all content blockers is blocking.
Well, no, it'd be on the same, like, from this client side, we wouldn't be able to tell, right? Like,
That's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
Blockers can't block it.
Really quick, circle back on the back forward cache or navigation type. We use it in two places at Akamai. Our old legacy run product, before the SOSA stuff, does not send Deegan on back forward. It does on regular nav and on reload, but not on back forward. I don't know why, no comments on that, just that's what it does. The bigger thing is for Impulse, so our customers can define conversion metrics. Some of those conversion metrics might be, I'm on this URL, like a checkout page. We don't increment those metrics on back forward navs. So if you go to like a checkout page and then go back and then forward, we wouldn't double count that checkout. So
It's worth noting Chrome doesn't implement GF cache yet, in case it's not obvious.
So having back forward as a type is helpful for us to not overcount things.
you can't get that from page shown.
Not if the site doesn't have backward cache.
But if there's a back forward cache, you wouldn't.
Page show fired, I thought page show fired whether there was back forward cache.
It
or
does,
not.
but it doesn't let you know whether or not the back or forward button is pressed. It only, like, the persistent value is only true if the page came out of the back forward cache.
Right.
If it didn't, if it was a back button pressed, but it didn't come out of the backward cache, it's exactly the same as a regular load.
You still got a page show it though.
You do, but you don't know that it came from the back. Like, you either could have typed the URL in the address bar.
I didn't think page show fired in that case, I thought it might fired it back.
Sorry, in that case.
Sorry.
So it's an interesting use of the navigation type. I'm not sure that this is the use that it was intended for. Maybe this could be exposed in a, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it would show up as code using it in the real world for real purposes
Yeah.
that we don't want to break, so we wouldn't want to
Yeah.
remove it, right?
Yeah.
I've also heard some browsers don't support server control pages in the BF cache, so it's possible a lot more back forward actually don't go through the BF cache than we thought.
Safari, because you're
Safari,
specific.
if there's a service script, it doesn't go in the BF cache.
Which is a huge carve out considering the sites that use servers, like Facebook as a service worker.
Okay. So,
Can you go through some of the other issues?
yeah.
Thanks for reporting.
I thought some of them were easier. I thought it'd be easy ones.
There's
We're just gonna
easy
pick
one
back
here,
and forth between these two until they capitulate and be like, whatever, move on. Let's go.
So, should it be promise-based? And the answer is no. It's like those.
I agree with that answer.
Is this exactly a year old? No, 2 days. Okay.
Listen. So, yeah, you
Still a
should,
question?
you should wait a couple of days before closing. So, I'm not sure what's maybe the observe step 5 asynchronous, but we could maybe go to the.
But the general principle here, I think, is right, right? That
No, we should not make this.
There's an established pattern of observer.
Yeah.
And we just want to be consistent and coherent.
And Ollie has a
If there is-
suggestion here.
Yeah, if there's like a macro issue with the
Oh, yeah.
observers,
And hope-
Let's take that to tag.
Right. And observe should not be written to block and do, or heavy asynchronous work.
Yeah.
And it should instead rely on, which was the other. And if it doesn't, if it's not implemented that way, then you don't need.
Okay, so, yeah, so Ollie basically says that, yeah, when we're adding reports to observer, that should be asynchronous, and that makes total sense.
Right.
Yeah, good, okay.
Sweet. Next.
You had exposed reporting API workers up when I walked in.
Yes, so it seemed
but it's
related
just
to Ben's use case, but here, like you said, that maybe we could have cases where workers themselves issue,
Right.
like create violations that need to be reported,
I mean,
and
you
yeah,
can
for
imagine
CSV.
case reports, for instance, or.
CSV.
Yep.
Yeah.
Basically, as soon as there is a thing you want to fire on workers, reporting API should be exposed to workers.
Right.
Yeah.
Alright, cool. Format dates.
Yeah.
Right,
Oh,
but just to clarify though, so for that one, we're not implying that reports are routed through the service worker.
No, we're not. We're just implying that the reporting observer constructor
Yeah.
interface is available to work.
I predict that the next issue that will be open is gonna be that.
Should they be? They're JSON-able, so they should be structure clonable, and if you wanted to send them to your worker, you could.
What, post message?
Yeah. But they probably shouldn't be intercepted by a reporting observer in that case. Just, if you need to get them and do something in a worker with them, then you already can. And if there's a reason that you need document generated reports in a worker, you can get them there. Nothing is stopping.
Yeah,
Right, you have an observer in the document,
Okay.
it can do whatever it wants, including.
Yes.
the worker.
Yeah. okay, format of dates.
Yeah, so the question at the end here is just, is there another spec in WebPerf's purview that uses dates? And is there a standard format that we should be using?
I don't know, we'll have to worry about more idea.
This feels like.
You know, I suspect some of the performance,
No.
do any of the like performance timeline things, like expose dates and
No.
timestamps to JavaScript objects anywhere?
Timestamps, like milliseconds and, okay.
Yeah, but we wouldn't have the notion of dates like that.
Oh, this is the date, yeah, that's right, so this is the date for deprecation reports. So we can do that down to the millisecond for expected from release dates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's that, but then there's also the, do these dates end up in JSON? So is it?
JSON does not have a date format.
Correct, but is it the client's date format? Is it standardized date? It's all that stuff, right? That's where you're going. Which is, how do I define this?
Right, yeah.
And
So what do we use?
There's an example here that it looks like it's totally non-standard.
Is
Because
that,
I would just try to default to like whatever we use date format.
There's a couple of add-ons.
structured headers have,
Maybe, like isolated 601 like does define a string format for.
The reason I say that is, at the end of the day, it's gonna be accepted by a server, right? And it probably already has some logic processing dates, right? We just want to align to that.
yeah,
Encourage that
at the
as
same
opposed to-
time, like this is JSON, so it's not gonna be processed at the HTTP layer.
So right now it's just an epic time, the anticipated removal, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That seems even readable.
Here's an example, apparently. It's the removal says 2020-01-01, maybe that's.
Yeah.
So I guess the answer is no, we don't have a.
Okay.
Pick one of the 15 standards.
All right, cool.
Pick one and that will be the precedent for the next time that will be.
50 years.
Perfect. All right.
So like JavaScript API, parse that, like, whatever one that parses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Data.js. Yeah. It
Is
does.
it locale dependent?
Is it just something you can pass the JavaScript data constructor?
See, numbers of those.
Relative URLs and endpoint configuration. No. It's. Yeah. Okay.
It's apparently already possible with the report URI CSP directive, but is not technically allowed in the report to directive. So maybe we're just deprecating it.
Except if it's being used, and then.
Right.
So,
Is there a good reason to say no? Or is it just that you don't like the taste of them?
What is it relevant to? Well, what is it relative to?
The documents.
The
origin.
documents.
no, so this is actually, so if you read my next reply, it's like the language fit, right? It's not strong no, it's not strong objections. But the next thing is actually the thing that you guys are getting at, which is I've seen this to be a footprint because people put relative paths and then the policy is on some arbitrary subdomain and then they can't figure out why the hell nothing works.
Well, that's true.
So subpath. So
Yeah, I was
then you have to have absolute paths always.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's
That's
just
that's what I was assuming, was absolute paths, but relative to the domain. Right, you're right, this is not, this
like
is.
it had like, yeah, or just strictly for usability, it's either, it has to be like, absolute path,
Yep.
okay. Relative, like, you're just gonna cause trouble.
So absolute path is okay. What about like a scheme relative URL?
Actually,
This is why I would go with no, and just to avoid confusion, because you're not saving like data on the wire here. Like,
Right, it's a few bytes, but yeah.
yeah, it's a few bytes.
Does anyone ask for this?
Well, I think that was
Like even if
this issue was actually somebody asking.
So one guy asked.
yeah, but maybe we can, like, even if CSP report URI is supported, maybe we can.
Well, and this one guy is saying, at Google, we currently use this.
Yeah.
So,
We can put
Let's-
metrics in to see if this is being used in the wild at all. I don't know if that changes the decision at all, but.
does that make sense to start with no and use data to drive
Yeah.
whether no isn't
Is
okay?
the answer,
Yeah, I mean,
that
You can always
makes sense.
expand to yes and support things we didn't support yesterday.
And even if it is no, but we only this exact thing, like you can at least constrain it then to the.
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't want this to block people from migrating from report URI to reporting.
Yeah.
At the same time, do they have an actual use case as to what, like, if they're migrating anyway, they need to change stuff. Can they also change the path to the absolute
They're
at that
saying it was
point?
much easier, hence we chose the path of least resistance, which is normal, right?
Yeah.
One thing we could do is take a look at the HTTP archive, report it,
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
or report
That's
URI,
right, yeah, we should have that.
and just get a sense for how frequently relative paths.
Is that an actual problem?
Right.
Yeah, but
Well, is it being used? I guess we don't know if it's a problem or not, but I suspect
If
people might be
you
using
find
this
that
because they.
80% of all the report URI usage is,
Is relative, then.
then, yeah.
that changes our conversation.
Although, yeah, maybe Like, if there isn't usage, that's easy. If there is usage, then the question is, can
Then
they,
we have
as
to
part
take
of the
part.
migration, also move to absolute?
Yeah.
If the answer to that is no, and there are actual reasons behind it, then we can, take that extra complexity and potential food gun, because that's life. But if we don't have to,
So let's look at each there, I think it's the answer.
And
Last one I have on here is, yes, credentialist reporting
credentialist reporting.
and love district credentials. All of these.
Yes,
I think we already-
so we concluded to say, like, you said emit, is there a reason for emit rather than same origin? Or,
Can you remind me of the difference?
the difference is on the same origin, you get credentials.
If you're reporting your code to the same origin.
Oh, right. I don't know. Would John be willing for same origin? We should ask. I don't have a strong opinion.
Okay.
I think the point here is just we didn't really consider it, we just copy pasted something from somewhere.
Okay.
Right.
So Mike is basically, Mike is basically saying that same origin would be useful. Like, basically the same origin would be better. I'm not sure if there's a,
So maybe we can just ping this thread and get John to
Okay.
respond.
okay, because he originally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any issues with credentials changing between the time the report generated and the time it's delivered?
Credentials changing.
If we, I don't know if there are, but I imagine that you generate a violation report, we queue it up for a minute, but in between that, in that minute, you've signed out and you've logged in as a different user.
Right. Oh, yes. When you put it that way, yes.
Okay, I mean, we can store the credentials and send them,
Wha-
you know, at
So,
that time.
what,
Like that.
because we are queuing,
Because, yeah, we can hold
because
them.
for persistent reports, because we're queuing them, there can be a change in credentials.
Even for document reports, I'd like to queue them, just so that if you generate like 5 violation reports, we don't have to make 5 separate connections. Just batch.
Sure, but you can get the credentials at that point in time, and,
But
generate the report with,
then
no,
you're
you don't,
keeping
you
a
don't
copy of the
know.
credentials.
No, you
And
don't
you can
know
also
that, you
send
send that through network stack
Right,
without.
you also can send a package that has the person's 2 different usernames, for instance, in the same
Yeah.
report from the same client.
What usernames?
Oh, like say that's their credentials.
If
right?
you're
We're sending
batching,
cookies.
if you're naively batching, you're creating the report content.
Yeah.
Which doesn't have any credentials. And then send that to the network stack. The
Oh, yeah,
network
yeah.
stack adds cookies at that point in time and sends it out. So
Right.
you have one
Yeah,
set
you
of
have one, you're right.
credentials.
Yeah. You might be
Um,
wrong, we're not represented.
which may be not representative of the time in which the errors happened.
You might also be associating a set of credentials with a URL which was not accessible by that user. If we're reporting the URL that the violation happened on, and the URL has some identifier in it or some user ID or some unique ID.
Yeah, you can add UIDs to URLs.
Yeah.
And then,
Right, it represents some resource that's protected.
You don't want to keep the credential for each report because it's a security
But hold on,
risk.
No, because the question is about whether we send credentials on the envelope on the post. Right, separately, we don't attach credentials
just
to
to make it
individual reports,
more
but
complicated.
what do we send each?
For the reports that are exposed to your report, so that you can obviously send out credentials. Seems like it would be really useful for an origin to know for which user, like let's say an error might have happened.
Right, yeah.
So if we say omit, the natural recourse would be, okay, I'm not gonna use your infrastructure, I'm just gonna use your reporting observer, because then I can just, it's another reason for me to roll my own.
Right, yeah.
And I definitely think it's there.
Yeah, but the queuing thing, how long are you planning to queue? For batching purposes?
I mean, I think right now we do it with a minute.
Really?
We're waiting up to 60
Why?
seconds for more reports.
Why? Do we, like, what's the,
I think for, I think it's actually even more.
yeah,
Like, usually when I look at it in DevTools, that was what I was seeing.
is that
was
an
what was
NEL thing or reporting in general?
I think it was reporting in general. If you trigger reports, just so that if you're triggering reports in like a loop or something, that we're conserving user bandwidth by not opening up hundreds and hundreds of connections.
How, like, what? Oh, if intervention or deprivation reports, you have a loop that touches.
Yeah, that for some reason it's doing this.
Just send one.
And it's not
Just
only
send
good for
one.
the user, but it's good for the server as well.
Yes, right. We'd like to just, batch these all up and send them back.
Yeah, it's worthwhile to look at that, but the credential change issue,
Yes.
or maybe if credentials changed somehow, you stop but you don't know that's a network stack thing.
Right.
Yeah, so there's kind of two things here. So the credential change case is really important to keep in mind, right? It's complicated by batching. If you give up on batching, then the issue goes away. The other observation is, as long as we're willing to report the reports via reporting observer, we are already giving credentials.
So if you grant batching, this is a non-issue. If you do provide a reporting observer is still gonna send that report with the credentials at the time that it sends them.
Right.
The only, background fetch would be the equivalent of the batching case, and I don't know where they ended up on credentials for background fetches, but that should be a similar case.
Yeah.
Cause it's someone from, yeah.
Click the link that says web standard. Not the link that says background fetch. I'd like to switch for fetch, but unfortunately, it'd be everywhere here. Yeah.
They should be.
Display a background fetch. This is for getting the image resource. That's it. With credentials. It's not the same as.
Includes.
This isn't for the main fetch itself, though. This isn't for the fetch itself. This isn't for the background fetch. This is UI can select an icon for display and fetch that. So that as like a notification.
So the
fetch
icon
something.
is credential.
Yeah. That's the only time credentials mode is mentioned. search record. Is it a request?
Yeah, I'm not gonna maybe.
I'm gonna populate this.
Oh.
Yeah, so we're in an event, I remove that marker, and then I compare the event timestamp with the timestamp in black. And the event timestamp must be lower.
Let's record these records.
That's equal to 0.
I think it's because we're trying to use hardware event timestamps,
And
there's gonna be some like process skew.
Okay, so I think you can go to here, API.
So
fetch.
might not be 61.
Yeah.
So it's internal request alone is no course.
So I happen to know that
Then
Windows.
it's rejected. Through the type.
Depending on how you.
Yeah, so it has to be a
So in
course.
Edge, we have a
Feedback.
method for.
Yes,
Okay.
but what's
Some
the,
of the Microsoft folks
what's
have
the
actually
credentials
helped
mode?
us with that kind of thing.
It doesn't say,
It's
if
the result.
it doesn't say, it's a myth.
It's the result of the request constructor.
The documentation
is here.
Okay.
And
We
if
had-
it doesn't say anything.
We had to
it's a
basically
myth.
go look at Windows code to figure out how.
Credentials move.
Like how the core implementation, reverse implementation.
There's only,
copy.
yeah, there's no mention
So
of it,
we
so I
could
think
then
it's,
invert.
we can confirm.
But there's, sorry, no, like fetch.
Yeah.
Fetch takes a list of requests. And we invoke the the fetch request constructor with those requests.
I suspect it also.
So the credentials mode.
So you can pass along any
Now the question
arbitrary
is-
request that you want.
Right, A, how much do we care?
And then later it will.
It will background fetch it.
Will we?
Yeah.
Will we attach a credential to that one?
Yeah.
Okay,
We should probably fix that.
so it's worthwhile to
Oh,
signal
yeah,
that.
that's not bad.
And,
I mean, there's gonna be some kind of
So
other
yeah, I
thing
think
we could use.
What do you mean?
Like an issue
if
somewhere?
it's a problem, it's a problem in both specifications.
We can keep
If
track.
it's not a problem, then yeah,
Then
that should work.
Get the event timestamp.
We can, so the premise,
Receive the event timestamp.
check the website, queue the background fetch, and then user logged in, logged out.
Yeah,
Later.
during that minute where you're
Restart.
either queuing a background fetch or queuing
But we could do it.
reports, user logged in, logged out, logged in is
Right.
another user. Now you can link both users.
Because the assumption you have
Okay,
is
yeah,
that the event execution time should be a new.
Yeah, that's actually a
It's the
pretty
dot,
reasonable
it's
use
the
case
dot
too.
timestamp
Exactly.
on the event.
Yeah. And the
I'm on
event that causes us to
Instagram,
be executing counted as
You upload a video.
Yeah.
I
Right,
search
right,
my
right,
other
right.
account on Instagram.
And your video gets posted to our account.
I guess, I'm not sure, my tense wasn't quite
Yeah.
correct there.
No, I think you were fine, I was just thinking
Or,
about it.
or I'm in,
And I was also
I
remembering.
hit a crash, I then log out, log in with my other user.
Therefore, we had.
let's-
to set the
let's
timestamp.
ask-
And I was like, oh, yeah.
They.
So I was actually thinking about the wrong implementation, but I was saying what I was saying as well.
And I
But-
would say. there
Yeah,
are
that
some
would support
cases where we just use
a myth,
now,
and if you need credential, like if you need a
Set
user
by
related credentials,
driver,
Yes.
you
and
should,
lie
yeah, but
probably in some rare
yeah, of
cases.
course, don't really have. any of
I
that.
remember many a
So
long
you,
day. some
you need
people use
reporting for that,
some
or you
people
need
go
a no,
stream monitor
no batching flag
They just
Right,
return
that
timestamps
will-
like a year
You can
past.
put it, you can put in your endpoint configuration.
But I think,
Yeah.
pointer events,
I think you put
Oh,
that.
yeah.
W and pointer.
don't batch,
because
I want
it's
credentialed user.
OS,
Credentialed requests.
I don't know.
It's funny how much of
No.
the OS code in Windows. we've
I'm willing to take the extra
control
load
of things out of drivers after
in return for credentials.
problems.
Yes.
That's a number of problems.
And just,
What, how much funny?
what?
It's,
Yeah,
it
it's not
lives
like
down.
anybody-
and lives down.
No kids
Yeah,
use
like,
this thing, it's
yeah.
nobody-
Yeah, but you can get it, or it's maybe you get cookies.
They're in the future anyway.
I guess,
Right.
No, no, no.
Right, see.
Yeah.
Implies lots of weird side effects.
So I have a very poorly there.
You can snapshot it, then you can snapshot
guarantee that you will send the old credentials.
Until you pass the process.
If you send the credentials by the time the request was.
Yeah, if it's implementable. I mean, if it's implementable without, breaking all the assumptions that the network stack currently has.
Yeah, that's true.
To have your actual promise, you can set whether or not.
You got to pass this credentials game to fetch.
Doesn't feel.
Okay.
If we're trying to also
So,
manage the transition.
we're done.
Right.
Yeah,
So
So,
if you say
like,
this is all.
that should be easier.
then it resets the time. Interesting.
Yeah.
But if it's not, then
Making my.
you're getting,
It's just any sort of.
If there's no
delay.
navigation.
Any delay at
If
all.
there's no
Yeah.
self-navigation associated, it doesn't test the time.
then you get the measure until that time and stuff. So it's like, do you get a full or do you get a?
Yeah.
And,
And you can pass.
Yeah.
Either.
And this is why I didn't know if you could do that with fetch though. The fetch API.
It's a
is
little bit
very
weird,
weird.
but we had this stuff showing up both in user time and in the.
It seems that they're just,
But.
Wait, how do
Never
we
change
show
it.
both?
Or
So when you anything, we're not gonna show the.
ambient and they're always wrong.
Yeah.
This is the bit that I hadn't modeled polyflow yet. We would show the.
Okay, so,
Or content based on.
If you had to trade off.
How? Because you already.
Having credentials.
Row.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I can just
Measure.
Right, and that allows you to then to do batching.
Yeah.
Things.
And it guarantees that the report is gonna be correct.
Right.
Or could you drop it when you detect the credentials are different? Like if you hash the credential and then at the time you send and you check.
So any change in the credentials?
Yeah, because it's such a common.
Yeah.
And.
Or maybe you could trigger the report to be flush the queue at that point.
Right.
I don't know if we can, but.
Not sure if we can.
Event on measure until has the same problem, right? You
I
hang
mean,
on
I'm
the event.
thinking Chrome maybe get this check, like, can you detect that?
And then call. User time and measure. That's the event.
Okay, is there any way?
Exactly the same one.
Right, but I thought
Well, I guess actually, no, you
the
can't.
benefit of using
How do you?
If you have to call duck cookie,
delay.
or, because even like a new,
Yeah, I think either we delay the dispatch or we dispatch twice.
any fetch, in the meantime, you have to return with the second header.
Or we don't dispatch.
Delete image.
Commutation is easier.
Yeah.
Like the whole goal
Yeah.
here is to be able to have a unified view of your event.
Passes flush.
Report fetch, back fetch.
That seems gnarly but possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why do we need to move the user time again?
And it's, yeah.
We don't need to. It's
And I guess we just need
ergonomics
to
thing, I
maybe
think. And it does mean that.
if we wanna go down that
It's much
path,
more ergonomic than.
what is?
Well, the thing is, if you also want to be able to use a promise-based approach for user training stuff, that is a lot of event timing. It gives some
Value is
consistent syntactic
understanding that
for using
something
promises
happens
to
for
define the end of the
like,
thing.
the event happened.
Right, so there's the value and then there's the
Right.
Complexity.
And if we want to be able to tie this into
Yeah,
that
but also the
navigation,
observation
it
that-
also gives a consistent.
because we expose some reports via reporting observer. You can do that today, right? So like.
Yeah,
Like.
to,
I
and the
can
fact that you can put a promise
ninety
to,
percent confidence, I predict
like
that John.
user, I guess a measure,
Yeah.
or
Because the
an event
default
time,
that John says is
or
omits.
a bunch of
You have to give
transitional,
them
Yeah.
starts and transitional stuff.
Yeah.
a reason why.
Actually, I don't know if it's the
Okay,
start
you
or
say
if it's the end, like, I think it's the start.
Is it'll force.
It's,
Developers.
The resolution of
Reporting
reporting
observer should be back,
triggers
and at
the,
that
we
point,
now shall begin to.
You haven't accomplished.
yeah, I think there's two things. I
don't know,
think
I
you could,
don't-
I think one option would
All you've
be
done is
to
just
start
forfeited
defining
of
the
your
time
ability to
origin,
batch.
the end defines when we'll start dispatching.
So
If we recommend that I can think, then you
Different
different
endpoints
ways
for
doing it,
users.
it's a little weird, but.
And the idea there is that if you're going to fetch or read from this, do you recommend that away?
Well, there's,
I think we
In
should.
case there are active animations and things, until you've actually got.
I think that's the next.
Until the script
I've
is
heard that
ready.
mentioned as explicit.
So
Can we prevent it? Actually, no, we could.
If we want to
Or,
do that,
or
then
you
sure.
just set this time
I mean, it's technically conversation.
to be
Yeah.
when you actually and forget about
I think
But then you lose a big
we could
chunk of
prevent
your.
it. This was the discussion on the,
Yeah, you still want this,
That's what event.
But you want to get the end.
Yeah, like,
Like
like
the
actually,
origin
like,
line
that's
is
that
that
question.
From the.
right, like if the origin policy.
yeah, so the
is
self
started,
nav, you wanna have a
trust
start at the
Yeah.
very beginning.
And then you know
It
that
turns out then the,
a copy of it
And
is
that timing-
being mutated for every user.
so in the
Then
land
you
of
kind
event
of
timing,
migrate.
you also sometimes, I don't even know in event timing, there's some promises with event timing.
You're wrong.
Sorry, I
Right
haven't
now
thought
we
that.
don't.
No, I know, I'm thinking through I understand the user timing used for promises, I understand the soft nav
Yeah,
used for
origin policy.
promises.
So for
Alone,
event
not
timing, it's
just
the same thing, right?
Yes.
It's similar
Right,
to.
yes, but-
Oh, yeah, you have an
Yeah.
event underway, and then you wanna be like, hey,
Fetch the resource, wait for it.
And then you want to have a unified
Okay.
view onto your event
We can stop
sequence,
recording.
including the asynchronous.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's exactly the
recording
same thing.
all of that.
I have started at the beginning of the event,